Hello, hello. Good morning. Hey everyone. Can you hear me all right? Testing a new cool camera. Let's see if it lasts for the stream. Hey Comics Legend, how you doing? Always the first here. Great. Awesome. I just realized I think last stream I had this microphone off and it was just picking up like an old set of microphone that I had sitting somewhere connected, and it looked pretty awful. It sounded pretty awful. But today it should be alright. Plus I do have this new camera that you can do these type of things. Alright. So I think we're all set. Got the chat going. Got ZBrush going, and yeah, all good. Hey Chris, Ahmad, Bilal. Start away with a question. How do you add thickness to a subdivide mesh in ZBrush? There's a few ways to do it. You can use panel loops. You can free subdivision level, use Cmodeler. You can use the dynamic subdivision, that sort of thing. So depends on what you're trying to do. Those type of questions are kind of like hard to answer because they rely a little bit more on the context of what you are trying to achieve. There's many ways to do the same thing. Just named a few. Alrighty, so what I'm gonna do today is, I thought kind of like a nice transition between what we did last time and what we are trying to do today would be to use similar tools that are in ZBrush Core Mini, but in ZBrush, so that we can take full advantage of the new tools. Also, you might notice, I don't know if you cannot see it, but I'm using the latest version of ZBrush 2021.6.3, and there are a couple of really cool brushes, really cool stuff that I might be able to show you. And in case you didn't know, I'm running a mini contest in my Instagram account, and it's about using ZBrush Core to create like a bug, like a creature. Let me see. I'll show you because it's pretty fun. And the winner of the contest gets full access, basically a seat in the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course, which is a pretty cool course / community. So let me bring it up. So this is an alternative, like another version to what we did last time. Hang on, it's loading up. This sort of thing. That's it's not the same one. It's just a different one from what we did last time. And in the last session a couple of weeks ago, I used ZBrush Core to produce like this, similar to this, like a weird beetle bug. Yeah, and I think that went really well. So I just set up like a mini challenge for the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course, where you can just take ZBrush Core Mini. That's the only requirement, that you use the limited toolset from that from the younger version of ZBrush, which is free, and just produce something like this. You know, you can take inspiration from nature. It's just, the idea is to create kind of like a creature, bug, insect type of thing, and that's it. The deadline is the end of the month, and the winner gets a seat in the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course, which, just for those of you who might not know what I'm talking about, is this one right here. So it's called the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course because I cover absolute everything step by step to learn ZBrush for absolute beginners. So you don't have to have any experience or anything like that. I cover everything, so you can just check this out. I'll just put it in the description in case you're interested to participate. It's a pretty fun little contest. Alrighty. So, like I said, the idea today is just generate some kind of like creature character, stylized character using similar features. So obviously the most kind of like relevant if you are comparing this with the ZBrush Core Mini would be Sculptris Pro. So what I have here is just a sphere that maybe we can reduce the resolution by dynameshing it with maybe 74% or 74 resolution. Oh, by the way, this is one of the new features. So if you go to geometry, I haven't played much with this one just yet, so I won't be able to tell you much about it. Dynamesh, right? So if you go to the geometry palette, palette, and go to the dynamesh section, you'll notice that the resolution slider now has this dot. So if you leave it on or off, it basically changes the algorithm. And I can't remember which one it is set by default but one of these algorithms, what it's going to do is recognize when you have like really smaller pieces in your mesh, and it automatically is going to add the necessary resolution to maintain the form. So it's just I suppose, like I said, I haven't tried it, but I suppose would be interested to see how it works when you have like a hand with a bunch of like fingers, and in Dynamesh, and you redynamesh with this new algorithm, it shouldn't pick up kind of like you shouldn't merge the fingers, that sort of thing. But again, I haven't tried it just yet. I literally installed this yesterday when I was setting up the new newsletter, which went out today. All right. So yeah, so that's one thing. So let's set it to 32 as the it's a very simple resolution, and I'm gonna change these to, let's go for the move brush first with AccuCurve. So I'm gonna use the move brush with a relatively large brush, and I'm gonna establish the proportions a little bit of this guy, kind of like the torso. So it's gonna be a stylized thing. Let's just enable symmetry. Maybe I think I'm gonna go for some kind of like Totoro proportions type of thing. So like very big, heavy body, and then just tiny legs, big arms, and cool face. But maybe the face is gonna be smaller. Alright, so just with this weird shape, I can already start to see, imagine some character. I'm gonna redynamesh that bit so that it's consistent all across. I'm gonna bring in the Epic Pen, which is that little software, just in case you haven't seen it, that allows me to paint on top of the screen. So just so that you know roughly what I'm trying to achieve here, the idea would be to have, I don't know, some kind of face around this area. This would be the fit, and maybe we can just work on some cool arms like this. We'll see. I don't know, I'm just deviating too much, but this is roughly what I'm going to do. So we're gonna use some of those tools to block that out now. What I think I'm going to do is resource to a different subtool just to work on the arms. So, and that way it's just gonna be easier to, work separately basically. So I'm gonna, let's just duplicate this guy, and I'm going to switch to, let's actually hold the Shift key and enable Sculptris Pro. So for you guys, should be on the stroke palette, Sculptris Pro, that one right here. And you'll notice, because I have the move brush, and this is one of my kind of like favorite ways to use Sculptris Pro. I use the move brush, which doesn't allow you to use Sculptris Pro. That's why the cursor is still red, because I have the move selected. But if I hold the Shift key, I can enable the Sculptris Pro just for my Shift key, and that's quite handy because I can use the move brush in the way that I'm used to. But then I also, especially when I have a large brush like this, I can remove geometry. So if I go into solo mode so that it only shows me one of these versions, I can hold the shift key and essentially just erase stuff. So I'm just pressing a bit harder to remove this geometry. So this is the power of Sculptris Pro, of one of the cool ways to use it. So this is exactly the same thing as appending a new sphere and starting from there. But if you get used to this workflow and using these tools, it becomes really, really easy to manipulate this type of shapes. All right, so I'm gonna bring in the gizmo. I'm gonna mask half of it or part of it, invert the mask, center to the unmasked areas. I'm gonna make sure that local symmetry is enabled so that I can, scale things based on the areas that are unmasked, and that's gonna be the arms. Well, that's a little bit too big. And I'm gonna work on a semi-relaxed pose. That should be fine. Still way too big. But yeah, I can redynamesh. So I can use a combination of redynameshing and the Sculptris Pro. And I'm gonna use the Sculptris Pro to simplify this. One of the things that you might wanna keep in mind when you're using Sculptris Pro is that when you're doing like very fine details or getting into smaller details, because of the way that because of the way that Sculptris Pro works, you might not have perfectly aligned symmetry. So you'll see I don't have a center line or anything, so the points on each side might not be exactly the same. You see some gaps in here maybe. So these sort of quads, you see they're like in different areas. So it's not exactly symmetrical. So that's an important thing or an important distinction for this workflow. But anyway, at some point you can just, or at whatever point you want, you can just mirror and well, and then you get like perfect symmetry. So yeah, let's just position this a little bit better. Right. So this kind of like what's the character from Bob's Bunch? The starfish character, I can't remember. It's just that's what it looks like. Cool. Will there be a second or third place for the contest? Maybe a discount of the course? Now there's only one. I mean, it's a very tiny contest, something that I put together in like a couple of days. It's not like I didn't really think much through it. I just wanted to give you guys some opportunity to join the course, especially because for those students that joined recently to the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course, the bonus kind of like for this enrollment are a couple of live sessions where I'm gonna show you guys how to render whatever you create in ZBrush. You can do everything in ZBrush, and then how to export it and rendering in something like Blender to just get up in more of a nicer render. But that's kind of like the bonus lesson for the course. So that's one of the things that I wanted to sort of like focus on in this enrollment for the course. But yeah, for the challenge, it's just gonna be one winner. That's it. Yeah, Patrick Star, that's the one. So it's kind of like a combination of Totoro, Bmax from Big Hero 6, and Patrick from Patrick Star. But we're gonna tweak it so that it doesn't look as ridiculous. But this is as a silhouette, this is pretty pretty standard. Cool. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is just merge these two together. So now this is a single mesh. We can redynamesh that, maybe slightly more resolution on that. But we still have Sculptris Pro enabled. So when I smooth with a large brush, it's going to reduce or increase the resolution. think we might have to start defining the head a little bit more, and perhaps play with the proportions a bit more. I think the kind of like starfish type of creature, it's a bit not as interesting. So I'm gonna hold the control key or just change to my masking brushes, and just gonna mask that area, blur a little bit, invert, turn off the symmetry, center, so now I can move, make him dance like this. But this is actually to explore the proportions a bit more. And we can stretch the arms as well with symmetry. Yeah, something like that. Let's dynamesh and soften that transition. But again, it's just a matter of playing around with the proportions. That's why this workflow and this method is so easy to change things on the fly if you don't like things, and I quite enjoy that. All right, so let's go ahead and block out kind of like the hands for this character, and then we jump into the face. And I think that's gonna be kind of like the focus of today, especially because if we set that up, we can work on some of the new tools as well. All right, so for the fingers, I think I'm just gonna use the snake hook brush with a smaller brush size, just to establish the main areas. This one, I'm gonna give him 3 fingers. All right, these are the usual sausage fingers, but if we go back with the move brush, we can start playing around and just sort of defining a bit more of the knuckles. And that just straight away makes it look a bit more interesting than what we had before. Still think they might be too thin for this type of character, so that's something that we can explore in just a second. All right. By the way, if you want to join that that sort of little challenge that I put in Instagram, the last session that I did in with ZBrush Live, it's all about ZBrush Core, so that might be useful. But also, I do have a free creature workshop. Again, it's for it's very basic, but I cover some important concepts for absolute beginners. So that might also help with the challenge. So if you're interested in that, it's in the 3D Concept Artist website. All right, got something going in here. Need some work, obviously, but just as a starting point, I think it works. I'm gonna set up the some key points here, like the elbow, just as a tiny way to to establish that anchor point in the anatomy on this fake creature. We can do the same thing for some kind of like shoulder plates or scapulas or something like that. This is going to be pretty stylized, so I don't think you even need to see that, but sometimes I like to just block it out for the sake of, to understand a little bit for myself what I'm doing. I'm going to take the inflate brush and turn off Sculptris Pro, and I'm going to use this to just quickly add more mass and volume to these fingers. And we can come back later and work on this a little bit more, but as long as we have something to start with, I think it's enough. I don't even think that this type of fingers are working for this creature, but we'll see. We'll come back to this later on. All right, and for the face, what I'll do is I'm gonna append a sphere. And with the sphere, I can sort of work on the main proportions of the face and the placement. So let's say I'm happy with the placement of the face there. Then I can take the body. And this is a super organic process, by the way. Turn on Sculptris Pro just in case. And just try to fit it a little bit better. Let's get a bit closer here. Right, that's not bad. Now I can take the sphere, turn on symmetry, give it a bit of shape, and I still don't know what sort of face I'm going to look for, or I'm looking for. But we can establish something fairly quick. So just to give you an idea of this very sketchy workflow and how I use ZBrush as well with as a sketching tool, the same way I would use it in Photoshop. I use something like the damp standard brush, or sometimes I use my custom knife, which is a little bit a bit stronger. And with a small brush size, still using Sculptris Pro, I can sort of establish certain things just by using lines. So just to give you an idea. I'll look at the chat in just a second. So with those lines, I can already envision kind of like an idea for the character. Again, you need to maybe, let's add something here. So I can feel like this is already the mouth maybe, or like the jaw, and something here for the nose, and that's it. So roughly, if I get closer, just with those two lines, like if I'm sketching in 2D, I already have a rough idea of the volume for this, and I can sort of go ahead and say, okay, this could be the placement of the eyes, or this is where I can place the eyes. Have a quick reference here for the nose, and then you have like this big jaw, angry character. So that's kind of like the smiley face. But then you also have this line that could suggest the cheekbones, and obviously I did that intentionally because I already kind of like in my head see it, but I'm just walking you through the process of how I start to see these shapes and these figures. So that's roughly, maybe I can extend this to make it, I don't know, we'll see. But that's roughly the idea, and that all comes from these very simple lines, establishing those lines. And obviously, after having that, we can bring something like the clay builder brush, and let's see, I'm gonna redynamesh or dynamesh, maybe a higher resolution than that. That's fine. And yeah, with this brush, with the clay builder brush, no Sculptris Pro, I'm just gonna refine some of the volumes. All right, and of course, using the damp standard brush, I can maybe refine the upper lip here. In fact, we can. I mean, this is gonna be pretty stylized, so certain sharp lines will, would work actually nicely towards the design. So what I'll do is I'm gonna use my select lasso, and I'm gonna mask, or sorry, isolate this, and I'm going to split hidden. I'm gonna dynamesh just this bit by itself, which is gonna be the jaw, and this one redynamesh. So we just sort of close that gap, and that way all this area is just gonna be the upper lip. So we have a lot more control, and then we have this sort of like underbite, or this jaw that we can use to create that sort of underbite, like so, and then use the move brush. And if you see me doing faces in the camera, when I'm doing this type of characters, I sort of like zone out, and as I design, I try to envision how they they move and how they behave. So I start like doing this, underbite faces, and it's when you design like things like Star Wars and spaceships, you start doing the pew, those type of like sounds, or I do, so it can look a little bit weird. All right. I feel like the head doesn't really go with the body, to be honest. So what I'll do is I'm gonna bring in the gizmo, and I'm gonna use this pizza menu, and I'm gonna isolate just those bits. In case you didn't know about this trick, you can select any subtool or the one that you want to move. So in this case, I have the jaw selected, and I want to move the jaw and the head. So just to change the proportions very quickly, if I enable this, I can move everything at once, right? And I have symmetry, so maybe I should have symmetry enabled. Yeah, I can move this at once. But if I don't want to move the body, obviously, I just want to play with the head, and I still want to use these all tools selected, what I do is I hold the Control Shift to access any selection tools, while the gizmo is selected with this icon, and I select this area that I don't want to, or I just need to cover some part of the tool, the subtool that I don't want to include in the movement, and then hold the Alt key, and you get that sort of hash line, so you can move just this bit. Alternatively, which is just a bit of a longer process, but I'll show you anyway, you can just select the tool that you want, mask it, the one that you want to avoid moving, and that works in the same way. But it's a lot faster if you want to, if you get used to the other process. So I don't know if it should be smaller. I wanna give it I don't know, maybe like the sense that the character is quite big, so making the the face quite small could help with that idea. Let's see what we can do. I'm not super happy with the face just yet, but one step at a time. All right, so I'm gonna add the eyes, so that might help to that might help the case of having that smaller face there. So I'm gonna click append, click on sphere, take that sphere. I'm just gonna place it. Let's enable transparency so it's just easier to see. We're gonna be a pretty small eye anyway. I'm gonna try to work with, you know, eyes sort of spread apart just to make it a bit more. If you, it's kind of like it's an interesting kind of like little tip for designing characters as well. The placement of the eyes would change what is kind of like known as well as the cognitive bias. So that's kind of like with, you know, certain shapes, certain forms, certain softness to the overall shape will suggest what the personality of the character would be. So if you think about it, if you put the eyes kind of like spread apart, that is similar to, let's say, you know, a cow or a horse or like cattle, basically. So it, in a way, it becomes like immediately more docile, more like a softer personality. Whereas if you put the eyes kind of like forward facing, that's kind of like a trait of a predator. So you can think about like a tiger or a cat. So as soon as you do that, it sort of feels a bit more, you know, mean in a way. So all of those things, as I work on this design, I think about those things, not necessarily I want to achieve something specific. I'm still designing, but if you keep that in the back of your mind, it will remind you, and it sort of like guides you to design this type of thing. Oh no, I think the camera is frozen. That's what I was afraid of. I'll just turn it off. Do you guys still see the screen? I think it's just the camera that froze. I don't know. Is that what happened? Let me know if you can still see the screen. Cool. Thanks. All right. Yeah. I'll have to look into what's going on. All right. So this is going to be obviously one of the eyes, and what I can do is duplicate that. Also go into transparency. I'm just gonna give it a red color to the new sphere, just so that I can see the difference. That's kind of like a work in progress type of polypaint, and I'm gonna scale it down a tiny bit, like that. So this is going to be the actual eyeball. Let's go into solo mode, and I'm gonna paint just a quick pupil or something. Hang on, let's just do something quick. So I have radial symmetry, local symmetry, so that I can paint with symmetry, with radial symmetry in this. I mean, this is not gonna be the eyes, and this is make it look a little bit too evil, but I just wanted to make something quick. Actually, let's just do something more along the lines of what I'm thinking for this character. So something like this. I just divided it and added just a bit of resolution and deleted the lower bit, because at this point it doesn't really matter the resolution. I'm still designing. Okay, that's gonna be the eye. Let's reset. Let's reset the current brush. There we go. Cool. So now I can take transparency off, and then I can use the other sphere. This is gonna be essentially the eyelid, In fact, let's just duplicate it one more time just to keep that original. And I'm gonna use something like the clip brush. So let's go ahead and you can press the space bar once you draw the line so that you can move it around. And I can press the Alt key once, and that creates a point and makes that sort of like a Bezier curve. And do that. So we have that upper eyelid there. And then I'm gonna do the same with this one. Hold Control and Shift to draw that line. And let go. All right, so we have kind of like the eyelids for this character. So what I'll do is, without moving the gizmo, so without centering or anything, because we had a sphere and the gizmo was centered to that sphere, that should be in the middle of that sphere. So what I mean by that is, you'll see the sphere would be something like that, and the gizmo is right in the center. So if we rotate this whichever way, it's going to rotate around that pivot, which is pretty handy. So I can just take that lower lid and do something like this, and then the upper lid do something like that. Just this, if I want to change kind of like the expression a little bit on this guy. But I quite like the kind of like dozy look like this, and use the move brush. Now I can just start adjusting the eyelids a bit and overlapping them a bit more. But something like that gives me something pretty useful to start working with, especially for this type of stylized characters. All right. And just for the sake of being able to see the whole design a little bit, we can go ahead and flip or mirror and weld, actually. So let's just mirror and weld, oops, without local symmetry, so it mirrors across the center of the world. So mirror and weld, mirror and weld, mirror and weld, right? So we have now all these pieces, and we can work with symmetry. Okay, so now I can take this face, and we can start refining the volumes a little bit more. And this is a dynamesh, obviously, so I can redynamesh at any point, but doing this allows me to, be a little bit more free in the way that I adjust the shapes. And then we'll use some ZBrush very quickly to simplify the forms and keep everything clean to move forward if we want to do details and that sort of thing, or just to clean the shapes. Right. I think I want to exaggerate this a little bit more, so I'm just going to mask that. Invert the mask. Take the gizmo, center to the unmasked areas, maybe mask that. And I'm just going to push that forward, like so. Redynamesh all of that, and simplify the forms a bit. So if you're designing this type of characters, right, or you're still figuring out the design, the masking brushes are a fantastic resource to play around with the shape. So don't be afraid of of just masking and things and pushing things like I just did there, because it becomes really just a very good tool to work with. So I think this one will be the nose. That's kind of like starting to give me an interesting proportion there. We might need to keep exploring it a bit more. Um, let's take the damp standard brush, and what I'll do with the damp standard brush is what I did before, but now I have a bit more of an understanding of what I'm going with this creature. So I can just, it's the same thing, just like marking things with the same brush, but I can sort of mark it a little bit better, if that makes sense. So I can press the Alt key and sort of push this line out rather than in. All right. We have a bit more of a shape. I still feel that the face is not really matching this creature, the body at least. So we might have to play around with some proportions again. So let's do the same thing. Oops. Just to move the face with the eyes as well. I think one of the key with what I'm trying to do now with this creature is just to cover most of the face with parts of the body, and maybe can add some kind of like stylized hair maybe. All right, so I think that works a little bit better. But I feel things are not in the center for some reason. I think I made a mistake. Anyway, let's just mirror. Yeah. So let's do mirror and weld. I moved the face out of the center. Doesn't matter. Mirror and weld. Mirror and weld. All right. Not a big deal. I think it's all sorted. All right, so let's work on the jaw a bit more. Make it a little bit more friendly with a subtle smile, maybe. All right, so I'm gonna bring in the damp standard brush again, and I don't know, define this a bit more. I tend to just do sometimes overdo the stylization. I don't know, I just like it, but I'm gonna try to keep it simple. Not a huge fan of the proportions yet, so we'll still have to play around with that. Oops, that was close. I'm gonna do a quick save. Let's have a look at the chat. Program, cool. Thanks, Comic Legend. Maybe it's Batman. No, we'll see. Alrighty, so that is kind of like a good starting point. Maybe for the feet, I'm just gonna push things out a bit. Kind of like a pajama type of thing, like a onesie. I don't know why, but it might work. And again, use the damp standard brush to redefine some areas. You can also use something like the standard brush to, I mean, again, I'm going for a very stylized creature, but we can establish some guidelines as to, you know, where the rib cage might be and that sort of thing. But I think that's just overdoing it. I prefer to use just the move brush and adjust things bit by bit. Alrighty, and I'm gonna take the move brush as well and just try to integrate the jaw even more, as in making it more part of the, you know, doesn't have a neck really. Cool. So I think that is all right for the time being. I mean, things like the eye, the fingers, and all of that could be improved, but we might do that in terms of the volume after doing a dynamesh. So what I'll do is also use the damp standard brush. I'm gonna exaggerate kind of like a line in here. In fact, let's do it with Sculptris Pro, so that is very, very sharp. So it does feel more like a suit at this point, but refining this line and making it really, really sharp is just another way to help the serum measure process. And I do want to have a nice sort of loop around that area. Let's do the same thing here. Go into solo mode. Maybe we can just increase the dynamesh resolution a bit more. And then use the Sculptris Pro again to define some areas that we want to keep, just to make sure that that is taken into account within the serum measure. So like the holes, the nostrils. So this is a bit of a different workflow from the usual thing. So rather than creating a perfect sculpture or something that is really well defined straight away, what I'm trying to achieve here is just smooth this out a bit without Sculptris Pro. What I want to do is to just establish some of the main forms, and using the Sculptris Pro, using that in combination with the damp standard brush, actually, just define the kind of like the sharp corners that I want to keep. So all of these areas, in the hopes that when the serum measure automates this process of retopology, I would be able to keep some of these lines. So that these lines are not necessarily part of the design in a way, or the sculpt itself. They're just exaggerating the difference between the volumes, just so that we can play around with the serum measure a bit more. Now I'm using the clay brush just to fill in some of the gaps. But you know, this is still like super sketchy and pretty blobby. but that's precisely what the series measure should take care of, or should help us take care of. It would be pretty cool if we can get a loop going around the eye like this. Okay, I'll do this the same thing. Just defining some of that. In fact, we don't need half of this, so we can just get rid of it. So I'm just going to clip it, or let's just hide that. Delete hidden and redynamesh. Let's just check that everything's fine. So I'm hoping to get a pretty flat area here. So maybe we can take the edge polish as well. The edge polish is just amazing to flatten certain parts of the sculpture. For hard surface modeling is just one of my favorites. But it is also a great tool to help you establish the planes. And at this stage, it works quite well. Alrighty, cool. Now for the body, instead of using that technique that I use for the head, well, although I use it here as well, I can also make use of the poly paint and then poly frame. So let's do that, and let me actually check the chat. Is he wearing a suit? It looks like it, but I might just make it part of the actual body. We'll see. Is it possible to make it so that selecting in Lightbox ZBrush or Alpha with just a single click instead of double clicking it? Not sure. No. It's not that. I mean, you can map a double click to one of the buttons in your pen, and then when you hover over it, just tap that and it will double click it. But it's just it's just another click. Yep. Cool. Alrighty. So with this, what I can do is just establish some polygroups, and that is also another way to help the series measure. So in this case, it's actually quite good. I'm going to select the lasso. Hang on, let's do it from here. Hold the Alt key. All right, I'm going to turn on double so that I can see the other areas that I must have touched. Hide that. Control W to assign a polygroup. Maybe turn off the line so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So that's one polygroup. I'm going to do the same thing for the arms. So something like that should be fine. That's actually pretty good. Group visible. I'll do the same thing for the hands. Just trying to set the loop here for the wrist. Yep, and let's auto group that. I'm just gonna tweak the bottom area because I haven't really worked on this bit much before I do anything. All right, let's just go ahead and establish some loops here for the legs. I think that's pretty much all I need, really. Group visible. It's not gonna be a crazy pose or anything. It's just a quick concept. Okay, if you wanted to, and you want to have more control for, let's say, the posing stage, you could also add polygroups to the fingers, and yeah, that'll make it easier. But yeah, for the most part, that's ready to you know, redynamesh or retopologize very quickly using the C-modeler, and then we can move on to the refinement stage and maybe add some cool stuff using the new tools. So let's go to the zero mesher. Now in this case, because we don't have like a super detailed sculpture, we don't really have to duplicate it and then project back the details. However, I'm just going to keep an original just in case in there, and I'm gonna enable these keep groups. So by enabling keep groups, we are going to take into account all of those groups that I just created. So all of these colors, every basically the difference between each polygroup should create a pretty distinctive loop. So in all the difference of the polygroups, but you see it has this sort of jagged edge. That is because obviously we have a low resolution. That's why I'm gonna keep these smooth groups on. So the smooth groups will perform when I click zero mesher and this is set at 1. ZBrush is gonna perform like a smoothing of those groups. So it's gonna keep this very clean. It's the same thing as doing this. Show you. So the same thing as polishing by groups. You'll see the line gets a lot smoother. So yeah, I'm gonna do that, but all within the zero mesher. And make sure that symmetry is enabled. The target poly count would be 5,000 polygons. Oh, sorry, yeah, 5. This is in the thousands, so 5,000. Let's see what 5,000 gives us. And I'm gonna click on zero mesh now. This is a pretty simple mesh, so shouldn't take too long, and it should give us a decent result to start with. It's very rarely that you're gonna get the perfect retopology in one go, but this one is pretty good. I mean, this area could be improved a little bit more. So if you get something like this, sometimes what I do instead of going back and redo it, although you can do that, is just smooth some of these points just to help the zero mesher process a bit more, because it is still pretty good. I mean, this area right here, I could improve it, and I can manually do that as well, by the way. But overall, it's a pretty decent retopology for an automated process. Now that we have pretty clean set of loops, as you can see, they're pretty clean, exactly what I wanted them. What I can do is run the same process, but turn this off. So I'm gonna still keep the groups, but now I'm not gonna smooth them. So click on that. So the poly count was the same, the target poly count. So that changes things slightly, and now we have a much more consistent topology. That's it. How cool is that? Like I said, I think I'm going to try to create more of a chubby fingers, not like a creepy one. So for now, this topology works just fine. Again, this is not going to be for animation or anything. Alrighty. Now let's take the face. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to duplicate that just to keep the originals, and the same thing with jaw. And then go one at a time. So let's go into solo mode. Make sure symmetry is enabled. This time I haven't added any polygroup. Oh, I actually did. Let's just refine that a little bit. So I'm gonna assign a single polygroup, and then I'm going to do this manually. Group visible. There we go. And go to keep groups, smooth groups to 1. Zero mesh that. And this is a pretty tiny, well, I think it did an alright job, but you can change the target poly count as well. But I think for the face, it's just fine. So let's do the same thing now for the other part of the face. Without assigning any polygroup, let's just see what this gives us. So, default settings, poly count, target poly count at 5, symmetry on, zero mesh that. Is it possible to record a 10-minute of macro and automate the action just in Photoshop? Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what the 10-minute mark does for you, but yeah, you can automate it. In fact, you can automate. That's something that I was testing out the other day. You can do macros of macros. So you can create a macro that does a couple of things, then another macro that does a couple more things, and so on and so forth, and then do one more macro that basically clicks or enables the other macros. So it goes through all the different macros. So that's kind of like a super macro. I don't know, that helps. All right, so this one is not too bad. It could be improved in certain areas, but it's not bad. Let's go ahead and do another zero mesh. And I think that's a lot better. Yeah, quite like this one. I think I want to stick with that. This topology. Like I said, it can be improved, but it's not bad. We can just refine it based on the loops that it generated. So I'm just using the damp standard brush here to push some of these loops. But yeah, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with this result. Alrighty. Let's check everything together. As in a low-res version of this mesh. Now that we have this nice loop, we can sort of smooth this a tiny bit to, again, work on that integration so that it doesn't look like it's just a suit. Although it might be an interesting way to see it. All right, cool. So for this one, what I'll do is I'm going to do a quick. No, that's too much. This is I was gonna show you a quick tip, but I need more resolution. So basically, what I was going to do is use the clay brush to stylize this, because the clay polish feature just looks at the peaks and valleys and the different features of the current or the selected subtool, and it's gonna sharpen those. So one thing that you can do is just divide this a few times, let's say to 3. So we're already in the subdivision, with using the subdivision approach, maybe 4. So we have 600,000, and now we can click polish or clay polish a few times, maybe less than that. So yeah, it's just sharpening it quite a bit. And I'm also gonna go into 4 subdivision levels for this for the jaw. Little tweaks here. All right, and for the body, let's go ahead and do the same thing. Just gonna divide it a few more times. So 600,000. So all of the subtools now are pretty smooth, and they have 600,000. I want to also bring in the strong smooth brush. So the smooth stronger, sorry, that comes with ZBrush. You just need to load it from the lightbox. Because for these type of things, once you have a lot of resolution, it just becomes a little bit easier to smooth things out. So I'm just using the smooth stronger to soften some of the lines. All right, so let's say that this is the base. Let's do a quick save. There's a few other things that I want to do, but I want to show you another part of the process. So what you can do is, let's say, do a quick poly paint pass on this, and then pose the character, and then continue working on the refinement of the design once the character is posed, especially if it's going to be for a concept. So yeah, let's take the body as an example, and I'm going to take my standard brush, turn that into a painting brush, and I'm going to give this guy some kind of base color. Maybe something like this. Also select the skin shade 4. With your enhancement of some of the edges to help the zero measure, would you have selected detect edges to help it more? You could do that, definitely, but the detect edges works much better for hard surface modeling, so it might give you some artifacts. But yeah, you could totally do that. If you do a combination of what I did, which is just the enhancement to the sculpture, like adding those edges, and you combine that with the polygroups, that is kind of like the ideal way, what I found to be the best way to go about it, if you want specific control over the loops. All right, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm going for with this guy here, but just gonna add some variation in the hues. Just something like this. Doesn't have to be the greatest poly paint. We'll come back to that later. Maybe the face could be some sort of complementary color. Let's try this color. That looks all right. So fill object, same thing with the jaw. So obviously the same part of the body. And then we can use kind of like dark purples or pinks to emphasize certain areas. It's kind of like at this point, rather than painting an ambient occlusion or establishing a palette, rather than painting the poly paint or establishing the palette, it's kind of like painting an ambient occlusion in a way. So I'm just targeting what I think could be the areas of contact with like darker shadows. And I think that sort of helps with the stylization a little bit more. Maybe darker purple. All right. So I think I'm going to use the same color here for the eyelid. So let's just do that straight away. Fill object and fill object, and maybe a lighter bluish tone towards the edges. There we go. And for the nose, let's see. I think a darker color will be too contrasty with the eyes. So let's just try a lighter version. All right. Again, this is just a quick, working poly paint. Do I always listen to loud music when I sculpt? Or you prefer the silence? A bit of both, depending on what I'm doing. I don't listen to loud music. I hate loudness. But yeah, I don't necessarily listen to something specific. Sometimes I just put if I wanna if I feel a little bit sleepy and I need to work, I sort of like need a bit of an upbeat type of music. So I just listen to funk music or you know that sort of stuff. Other than that, as a background music, and when I'm say background is I just put it in the background, and when I'm designing I sort of like zone off very quickly. I listen things like what's the I was listening to a radio and a playlist. What's the name? Club de Belugas. I think that's how you pronounce it. Club de Belugas or de Belugs or something like that. It's a pretty cool one. It's just a bit of a mix. Not sure if you've heard of it, but yeah, it's a really cool type of music to just listen in the background. But it depends. If I'm doing something like what I'm doing now and I need some kind of like inspiration, I listen to other type of music that is more suggestive. That the lyrics, I can sort of visualize what the music is telling me in a way. But yeah, it really depends. I don't have a preference in the music. Sometimes I just listen to jazz or like I said, funk music, or depending on the mood. Sometimes I feel like reggae music, whatever. I'm not um I'm not married to any particular type of music. I just like the melodies of depending on what I feel like. I don't know if that doesn't answer the question. That's just like me um, mumbling. Okay, so let's say that this is a good base for this creature. What I'll do is I'm gonna save this as let's call it creature 01, right? And what I'll do is go to the transform palette, to the Z plugin palette, and go to the transform master. And the transpose master, what it's going to do is take everything to the lowest subdivision level, create a single subtool, and allow me to pose it. So that's what I'm going to use to pose this creature. Now, before I do that, actually, let's actually define this a bit better. Just forgot to do that. Turn off the poly paint, and let's use the damn standard brush. Because now that we have this very clean geometry, it's going to be a lot easier to sort of define these areas. Like if we sort of follow the loops that were established with the zero measure. So obviously we need some working here. So yeah, this process is more about integrating those pieces and making it feel part of the same. But again, because I'm trying to stylize this, I want to keep a very clean sculpt. So I'm using the smooth stronger to keep everything very, very clean. Alrighty. Cool. I think that's looking all right. This one doesn't need much definition. Yeah. So I think this is fine. So let's just go ahead and do. In fact, let's just save on the previous one with those changes. And let's go ahead and click on C plugin, T-pose mesh. And basically, like I said, ZBrush is going to take all of your subtools, whatever you have visible in the previous one. That's why I only took the visible subtools, bring them to the lowest subdivision level, and then you can basically pose this character a lot easier. Another cool thing about this process is that you can create your own polygroups in this mode, right? So if you have polygroups, you should bring them just fine. But let's say if I enable symmetry and I want to select the poly loop that we created with the poly pane before, I can invert that. Let's go ahead and click on auto groups. Right, so now we have these two different polygroups. Let's turn off symmetry. Group visible. And group visible. And all of them look kind of like green just because hang on, why they look green? Shouldn't be. Interesting. I think it's just using some kind of poly pane, but it doesn't have any. But anyway, what I wanted to show you is this, that you can create your own polygroups, and then when this is just to pose the character, and when you send it back, you don't have them anymore. So it's just a quick way to do it. So I'm gonna do an extremely simple pose for this guy, but hopefully something that looks quite interesting. So let's use the move brush or the move topological as well. All right, so I'm gonna start by just rotating the whole body a little bit. So I'm gonna use symmetry with the mask lasso. And I'm gonna blur it by clicking on the mask, holding Control, bring the gizmo, center it around there. Oops. Make sure that symmetry is disabled. Alrighty. I'm gonna take this part of the face, blur it a little bit. Hang on, let's do that again. Center to the unmasked areas. And I'm just gonna push it forward, maybe rotate it a bit. So you see, I'm breaking some of the stuff, but it doesn't really matter. Let's take this leg, blur a little bit, and push that forward. And let's bring this one closer to the body. So this part is quite boring to watch actually, but I just want to show it to you because sometimes when you get to this part of posing, it could be a little bit frustrated when you start to see that things will break, like what I'm doing here, and see these lines. But don't pay too much attention to that because that is inevitable. You have to go through the process of fixing it, especially when you work in a pose like this. Let's exaggerate this arm so that if it breaks, I can show you how to fix it a little bit. So I want to position the pivot roughly where the joint would be, where let's say just below the acromion process of this character, just the shoulder, right? So I'm gonna put it like this. Maybe this is way too much. Let's invert it, and you can hold Control and Shift to sharpen, whoops, Control and Alt, sorry, to sharpen the mask, right? And you can also grow it. I sort of have to remap my tools, but you can sort of map this, mask certain areas that you want to protect, like so. So I don't want to pull all of those points there. And then let's invert that and blur that mask. Depending on how sharp you want the rotation, you want to leave the mask sharp or not. Let's move this forward like this, like a kind of like a gorilla type of forward rotation for the shoulder. Yep, I think that works. And we can, let's leave it like that, and then I'll show you how to fix all of that. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with this guy. Oops, invert the mask, center that rotation there. Same deal. I think it's kind of funny, the pose. Okay, this one straight away before I remove the mask so that I can control this a bit better. I'm gonna hold the shift key to access the smooth brush, and as I start smoothing, I'm gonna release the shift key. So that gives me the alternative smoothing brush. So that way I don't remove volume, I just stretch things. So let's go ahead and clear that mask. So it looks really weird at the moment, but this is kind of like the next process. The next stage is to adjust this sort of look. Let me see the chat. Cool. Glad it's helpful. Is it not more efficient to pose the character before you retopologize them? Otherwise, it's double the work. Maybe seeing something. It is not necessarily the most effective one, especially because when you do the retopology, you might have, and I'll show you an example of that in just a second, but if you do the retopology when you have like a T-pose or an A-pose, that means you have it as a symmetrical mesh. So going through the process of sculpting it, of posing it, it's just moving those points, but the symmetry is still there. So when you go back to the original mesh, you can still use posable symmetry, and yeah, you know for a fact that, let's say, the fingers have the same loops and the same topology than like if you were to do this right now. So like if I have the dynamesh here and then retopologize it. But I know what you mean, and I do sometimes do that when I want to do a more dynamic pose that I know for a fact things are gonna stretch and change quite a bit. You can totally go ahead and do that and do a zero mesh after you pose it. All right, so the way that I fix this, let's go ahead and enable something a bit more shiny, something like that. Enable polyframe and turn off the fill. In fact, let's just use this one. So my goal now is to make all of these polygons a little bit even, or more even than what they are. So for that, I'm just gonna use the smooth brush, but I'm gonna use the smooth strong. So it's gonna be pretty strong, the effect. And when I start, so let me just show you in here. So if I were to smooth this with the normal smooth stronger, so holding shift and do this, you see what I get is this really weird shape because it's actually removing volume. So what I want to do is start smoothing, so holding shift, start smoothing, but when I start smoothing, I let go of the shift without letting go of the click, and that sort of does the same thing, but it maintains the volume a little bit more, right? So that's what I'm doing right now. So as I press, I let go of the shift. As soon as I start smoothing, I let go of the shift, and that sort of maintains that volume a bit better. And this is especially useful in these areas right here. So yeah, that's the whole purpose of this second step of after posing it, is just to sort of distribute those loops again a little bit better. And you can also use the move brush. That's what I have the move brush selected, to just move things a little bit, just nudge them. And yeah, that makes it easier to move things around. But I guess the point of all of this is don't be afraid of breaking things, because you can totally fix them afterwards. And this process that I'm showing you, actually it only works because we have a relatively clean and low res mesh, right? If you do this with dynamesh, it might not be as useful, because the distribution of the polygons and the loops is not going to be as clean, or yeah, nowhere near as clean as this. So that's another reason why I would just go from through this process beforehand. Another thing I might do is just mask the hands, or this hand, just to make it a bit different. Let's play around with the masking, sorry, with the pose of the finger, all the fingers. So it also depends on where you place the pivot. So if you leave it just right in the middle of the unmasked areas, it's just going to rotate around that. But if you place it where the knuckle should be, you have a better idea of, a more natural rotation, right? And even though I'm stretching this bit, doesn't matter. You can just, without removing the mask, you can go ahead and do this. Maybe invert the mask and then do the same thing, and then clear the mask and go through the process again. All right, I think we're getting somewhere with this guy. And because I have the move topological, let's say when I move the arm, it doesn't affect the body as much, obviously depending on the size of your brush, but I can sort of pull this closer together. By the way, another thing you can do during this process is something like the clay brush, right? Or any other brush really, just to add volume and to refine the volumes a bit more. And remember, you have that set of polygroups that you set just as a working polygroup. So that's another great way to tweak this. So I'm just refining the volumes a bit, just to add kind of like a belly, this guy. And we can mask and invert the mask. Sorry, bring the selection and invert the mask, and we can work on inflating some of these areas kind of like to accentuate the pictorial a bit more. Let's do it with the matcap. There we go. But yeah, anyway, keep in mind that we still need to sculpt things when we come back. This is just a very quick pass to readjust that sort of weird pose that we did for this guy. It's kind of like a very uncomfortable way to walk, but I kind of like it. Let's rotate this hand as well. All right, I think we are getting closer. And we have about 30 minutes, so let's just go back. You can save this file as well, by the way, but you can click on T-pose. So again, from the C plugin, transpose master. By the way, you can also click on this layer button. So when you go back to the original, you will save that pose that you just did in a layer. So that's pretty convenient if you wanna go back and forth. But I'm gonna click on T-pose. And now ZBrush is going through the process of assigning that pose to the creature with the subdivision. And by the way, you can also go back and forth many times. So if I want to, I can just click on T-pose again, right? So I'm back to this mode, and I can take something, let's say, just to make it easier for sculpting based on the pose, I'm going to rotate the whole character. Turn the floor on. Just make sure that this the character is sort of touching the ground with both feet, which we also might have to work on a little bit more because they're just blobs. But yeah, so rotating the entire character sort of helps with the rotation of the camera. So now if I hold the shift key when I'm rotating to snap, I can snap to a particular view. In fact, I'm just gonna exaggerate the rotation of the face a bit more. Alright, I think this is good enough, right? We might have to consider the way that these guys sort of moving to readjust the anatomy a bit, but for the most part, I think it's quite good. I could spend a lot of time just in this because this is kind of like the pose for the shot in a way. So it kind of like needs to represent the character in a good way, or at least allowing you to read the character the way that I wanted to. So that's why I would spend quite a bit of time in this. Let's rotate the character a bit more. Just trying to avoid some tangents. There we go. And go back. Just readjusting those things. But now we can select, let's say, the body, and we still have our subdivision level. And we also have, if we wanted to, oh, I don't have them here, but let's go to the lowest subdivision level and set up some polygroups really quickly without symmetry. So let's do that. That's not the polygroup. This one is. So auto group. Visible. So now I have that polygroup. Let's do the same one here. Hide that one. Auto group. And polygroup visible. There we go. Actually, one of the new features is actually, pretty handy, and it saves you a few steps. So you can just have that polygroup, and if you press Ctrl, Shift, and Q, it just selects the entire polygroup all the way up to the point that we, as soon as ZBrush finds another polygroup, yeah, that's how it finds it. So it's pretty handy. All right, so what I'll do is mask this one out. Go to the highest subdivision level, invert the mask, and then, yeah, I can use something like the clay brush to start adjusting this a bit more. And this is just a quick way to compensate that pose that we did. Again, I'm trying to keep things stylized. It doesn't have to be a perfect. I mean, it needs to suggest where the anatomy goes, but I don't want to define it too much. All right, and if you guys have obviously any questions so far, because this is this process is kind of like hard to, I can walk you through it. It's a little bit boring to watch because it's very repetitive, and I think it's interesting. But if you have questions about something else, I'm happy to talk about anything else and try to answer any question as I go through this process. Cool. Alrighty. Let's clear that mask. So yeah, this is kind of like bored with his life, but that's kind of what I wanted to do with this creature. Okay, so in terms of the design, definitely the legs need a lot of work, and this foot. So I think I just want to add maybe, I don't know, maybe some claws, but I'll do that after because that's kind of boring to watch. Let's use these last minutes of today's stream to work on some of the new stuff. So if I wanted to do, let's say, haircuts for this creature and just fill it with hair, this is a pretty interesting workflow, and I covered this a bit more in the newsletter that I sent today. So if you're part of my newsletter, you should have got an email already when I walk you through all of those things. But very briefly, in terms of the workflow, what I'll do is I'll append a cube, right? Make it a Q cube, so very simple cube, right? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a Q cube. as long as you can sort of fit it within the character and you don't see it, it's fine, right? And once you have that, this is kind of like your insert mesh. And I'm going to use these are the two brushes from ZBrush 2021.6.3, or at least some of the additions. So you have the flat curve and you have the flat curve snap. So these ones are really handy to create haircuts. So I can take, let's say, start with the flat, the snap one, and the main they're exactly the same thing. The main difference is that as I draw this one, this will snap to the surface, right? And the other one, the one that doesn't have the snap, obviously allows you to, go like this and just create these sort of flicks, right? So if I wanted to, I can take this flat, maybe with a smaller brush size. Also, you can change the depth, or like how much is embedding. So right now you see this, obviously the geometry, the amount of resolution that this brush has, it's not enough to sort of cover the curvature of the arm. So what you can do is push this one up. You'll find that on your brush palette depth here, and that way it sort of leaves the center point where you, or the contact point where you would draw that new curve, is slightly over the surface. So that middle line here is the surface. So I can start doing things like this, click somewhere else, and very quickly you can start sort of like adding these haircuts to cover the entire body of this creature. And because it is just a normal brush, it allows you to establish kind of like the flow of these haircuts. So I find that to be quite handy. I mean, I had a brush that was exactly like this before, and you can create your own brush that is just like this, but it's great to see that it's already integrated in ZBrush. And the reason these are not necessarily gonna be haircuts, but I do wanna show you another tip, because these brushes allow you to, placing these haircuts with this brush is extremely easy. So I want to show you another tip. I think this one as a starting point to cover the arms and the back is fine. I'll show you the other one in just a second. But anyway, I just wanted to make the point that it is very easy to use, right? And then we can take a smaller brush size and do smaller brush or smaller haircuts here, just to cover this bit a little bit. So this, in terms of the workflow, this is what I would do first. So I would establish like a layer of these haircuts that are using the snap brush, and that way I can sort of cover the scalp or whatever I'm doing a little bit easier. But yeah, it's just to cover the gaps in a way. Right? And then we can take let's clear the mask, take something like the move topological brush, and we can adjust some of the points that are sort of sticking out, some of the intersections. I mean, this one, I won't spend too much time on this because this is the process that would take the longest in terms of placing cards. Or a good placement of cards definitely needs some manual process, I think. So won't spend too much time on that. There we go, right? So then we can take the curve flat, the one that doesn't snap, and we can do things like this. Smaller brush size, right? So it sort of like gives you those flicks, and of course you can manipulate the rest. So this one works more of with a camera angle more than anything. But again, it's super straightforward, very easy to place these cards. I'm gonna add a few here at the back. Okay, getting there. So this process, anyway, it's just very manual at the end of the day, but the new brushes, and that's the reason I'm showing you, it makes it really easy to do this type of thing. And obviously, there are other tools that were introduced recently in the stroke palette. Under the curve functions, just curve, you can sort of bend start, bend end. In this case, I would potentially just lock this start, and that way I can sort of pull things easier. So I can do this, and then the start of that brush remains untouched. All right, let's clear that up. And let me see the chat. Guide us through how to make a rope belt using curve. Oh, there's I'm sure if you just Google that online, you'll get heaps of those. That's a very specific question that doesn't really go with the character, so I might not do that, especially because of the time, and I want to show you something else. But if we have time, I'll show you. There's many different ways to do it. All right, so that's one of the new brushes. Definitely really handy. So the other thing that I wanted to show you is this other one. I mean, this one is a brush that's been in zeros for edges, the curve tubes and the curve cube snaps. So if I take the curve tube, let's select the cube, and let's split hidden. So I just have another cube here, and I can hide these ones for the time being. The tubes now allow you to work with a gradient. So if I select something like this color right here, and I draw a tube, ZBrush is going to use whatever poly paint I have, because I also have RGB selected, and when I draw the tube, I get this this nice this nice color. But if you open up the color palette, you see this switch here called gradient. So if you enable that, ZBrush is going to use these two colors. So the one on the left is the root, so we can click on that and select something like this, maybe dark color like this, right? Something similar to the body or close enough to the body. And the tip, we can click on that and get something a bit more, like a bit brighter and lighter, right? So basically left is root, right is is the tip. And because I have gradient and RGB enable with these two brushes that now support polypaint gradient, you should have, I mean, let's enable polypaint first. There we go. So it's kind of like hard to see in this case. If I turn on this one, you'll see a bit better. But the root is this sort of darker color. The tip is this lighter color. Make it a bit more obvious. Yep, there we go. And so that's a really cool thing to do, some sort of like stylize hair, because then you can take the stroke palette, look that to the right, and on the stroke palette we can go to curve functions, modifier, sorry, and click on size. And as soon as you enable size, this curve follow would, the curve will start to influence the whatever you do. So if you click and drag, now the beginning, the root is pretty tiny, and as it goes through the curve or through the stroke, it becomes larger, right? So I can undo that and flip that and maybe just add a bit of tapering, right? And now I can do this, and we can sort of embed this a bit more, and now we have this sort of stylized hair that has a gradient already. So I can start doing that. So this is just another way of, doing this sort of thing, and maybe take the functions, not the functions, sorry, the curve, lock start, so that I can push things like this, right? I think this sort of style suits more this creature. But anyway, that is another new addition. Now these curved tubes and the curved tube snaps or snap support the gradient tools, or like in polypaint. Anyway, you see, I can sort of get lost in this process as well. It's quite fun. Obviously, when you finish, you have that nice gradient. You can also use the curved tubes, sorry, the move topological, sort of like embed this a bit more, and work on those transitions so that they're not, they don't look like tubes. They actually feel part of the sculpt, right? And with the move topological, you can also tweak any intersection, just with the same thing as the other brush that we use. So yeah, that's not bad. Kind of like an interesting, weird creature. And let's, just to wrap up today's session, I'm gonna show you another trick using the placement of those cards. So let's hide this one for the time being. Let's go to this one. Right, and let me just see the chat. You said you released a newsletter today. Where can I sign up for that to get yours? But I want to make sure. If you already signed up for it, that's weird that you didn't get it. Maybe check the spam or something. But yeah, it's the same newsletter. So if you're already part of it, you should have got it. If you want to just make sure that you are signed up for it, you can go to just go to pablanda.com. So my handle, the one that you can see on screen at the bottom around here. So just go that.com. So pablanda.com without the ad, and there's a link on the right hand side that that's just points you to the right place to sign up for the newsletter. Can gradient be activated on the haircut curve brush too? Yeah, absolutely. They accept or they support the gradient. So you just need to enable it and the color. Let's just make it a bit obvious. There we go. So it also allows you to have this gradient in the haircuts. What's exactly the difference between the move brush and the move topological? The move brush just moves anything that is within the range of the brush. So the range meaning if you click here and this is the size of your brush, so the whole radius of that brush, that's kind of like what you can grab with that. And if you click on the move topological brush and you click on, let's say, this mesh here, you'll see it only moves one, and that is because the move topological, even though the size and the range of the brush is the same, it respects the topology. So as soon as you click somewhere, ZBrush is going to analyze what other points are connected to this, which in this case none of them are. They're just like disconnected, right? So it's only going to allow you to move that initial point that you click. So it's quite handy in that sense. Okay, so I'm gonna click on these haircuts. Comics, you didn't get the newsletter today. That's interesting. I will check that, but yeah, you should have got it. Maybe there's some kind of like weird new filter that prevents it. But anyway, so now that you have these haircuts, they're single-sided mesh. These haircuts, or the way that you place, like as you saw, is quite handy. But you can very easily turn these haircuts or these single-sided polygons into a more of a stylized hair, right? So I'm gonna show you. The first thing I want to do is, because as soon as you draw them, they come with this crease. So I'm gonna go to crease palette and I'm gonna uncrease all. So now none of them have any creasing. And now I can also go ahead and click on the dynamic subdivision and click on dynamic. So as soon as I do that, right, everything sort of shrinks a bit, and that is why I remove the creasing. If I left the creasing, I will keep the original size, but now we have this very smooth surface. And what I can do is enable thickness. So as soon as I enable thickness, you will start to see these sort of tubes, right, which work really well as a stylized mesh for this creature. But if you don't want to have that sort of tube shape, what you can do is disable this post subdivision thickness, and now we have these more like these softer shapes, right? And you can increase the softness of that post subdivision, disabling this post subdivision thickness. And we can also increase the subdivision as well, maybe to 3. So we have these very smooth pieces that look quite stylized. So I can, let's go ahead and just apply those. So now this is a new mesh. Maybe actually let's undo that, duplicate, just to keep the original, and apply. So now we have actual meshes, and we can also auto group, right? We have actual meshes with thickness and subdivision from those single-sided polygons. So now we can use the move topological brush. I'm going to enable AccuCurve and maybe just make this slightly more pointy, some of them. And that also allows me to tweak the placement a bit more. But I think for the most part, they look pretty good as a sort of rounded shape. Mike's gone. Sorry, I wasn't talking. Can you guys still hear me? The mic is sounding like a robot. That should be fine, unless the internet is gone. Kind of robotic. Yeah, I think that might be the internet. I haven't changed anything. Still robotic. What's going on? We're wrapping it up anyway, so let me just see. Is this better? Can you hear me a little bit better? I am Iron Man. Fixed? Okay, cool. Don't know what that was, but cool. All right. I just changed the source in OBS. So what I'm doing here with the move topological is very quickly embedding these pieces a bit better, and using the move brush, sorry, the smooth brush to maintain everything very clean. But again, that's another manual process that is very boring to watch. It's just a matter of tweaking this until you get the result that you want, covering the gaps, but you get the nice stylization with this, I would say, the hair strands or hair cards quite easily. That's one of the great tools or cool workflows that I found with the new tools added just recently to ZBrush 2021.6.3. Right, and let's just give it a similar color to this. Right, and the other ones, they're kind of like, you have two options between this and this guy, so don't know which one looks better. But anyway, just to wrap it up, if you go to the ZBrush Guides website, actually, there is a free pack, and it's been there for ages, but you have this pack, this hair pack, that allows you to add sculpted hair. So if I wanted to continue working with the hair on this guy, I can do this and then just generate this quick stylized hair. Or there's a bunch of them. That could work quite well for this. Stylized clumps of hair. Oh, by the way, if you see this in any of the brushes in the packs, that is sort of wherever you paint this, it also adds it somewhere else. That's just because I might have just left the wrap mode to 1, so just set it to 0, and that's it. But anyway, it's just a quick way to add this sort of stylized hair to whatever characters or creatures. Right, if you wanted to. I'll delete that. I just wanted to show you that is there. That's it. That's it for today, guys. I'm gonna have to decide which one looks more interesting. This one looks kind of like more bored with his life. This one is still interesting, but yeah, I might just work on this one a bit more, and that's it. This is what is that? What is Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. The brushes that I just showed you, this thing that I have selected. This is just a custom brush that I built for the stylized hair. Do I have any videos how to make double action brushes? I did have one. You might have to find it in the ZBrush Guides website. I can't remember where it is, but I do have that. And I actually have a video that I'm working on to show you how to create a scar brush. And I'll walk you through the process of the different things that I usually tweak to create your own custom brush. And that's going to be on my YouTube channel. So it's pretty new, but if you want, just go to my YouTube channel, which it's, I'll share a link just to wrap up, and you can subscribe if you want to, and turn on the notification thing so that you know when a new video is up. Chat, where are we? Here we go. Cool. So yeah, the video that I'm working on, not sure exactly when it's going to be ready. I just started sort of like putting it together. It's about that. It's how to create your own brushes in ZBrush, which is pretty cool. And now I'll show you how to create kind of like a scar brush as well. And yeah, and this is this is the type of testing brushes and resources that I develop in the 3D snippets. So if you're interested in that as well, we are in the process of working. We're in the middle of working on this month's creature, which is pretty fun. I'll show you what we're doing. It's pretty cool. So every month we try to work on something else. So this month of April, we are working on this creature. So the focus of this month is fiber mesh and dealing with the fiber mesh and all of that. So yeah, we're working on that in my Patreon called the 3D Snippet. So if you're interested in that and see what I'm doing in that project, you can go ahead and go to 3dsnippets.com, and that should show you the Patreon project. But yeah, all right. So I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Hopefully you found this session useful, and the creation of this blob. I don't know. You feel free to name it. I'll share it in Instagram soon. And yeah, I will see you in a week. Hang on, what's today's date? Yeah, in a couple weeks actually. So not the next week, but the following next month, I'll be back again with another ZBrush live session. Alrighty, take it easy, guys, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.